In this video, I'd like to talk about the so-called death of Agile and place it in the context of a decades-old contest between a managerial and an engineering mindset around engineering management that I have called Project Wars. Engineering management is the application of managerial theories, processes and techniques to the process of controlling a technological or engineering delivery. My contention is that there is a fundamental tension at the heart of engineering management between an emphasis on a managerial approach and an emphasis on an engineering approach. In software engineering management, this tension has created a pendulum of prominence, swinging between structured managerial approaches and agile or engineering approaches. The latter swung into prominence in the first 2 decades of the new millennium, following the dominance of the former structured approaches in the last 2 decades of the previous millennium. But the story starts earlier in the 20th century. Project management is a very modern concept. The first references to project management do not appear in any kind of book or journal until the mid-1950s. Almost everything that forms the basis of what we call project management was developed in 2 pieces of work in the 1950s that had their roots in military planning and operations research in the Second World War, the development of CPM and PERT. Critical path method was created in joint work in the 1950s between DuPont and Remington Rand. It was developed out of the work done by DuPont as part of their involvement in the Manhattan Project. Program evaluation and review technique was developed by the US Navy and Booz Allen to support the development of the Polaris nuclear submarine project, and was published in 1958. It was after the publication of these 2 basic approaches, CPM and PERT, that project management came into being. The International Project Management Association was founded in 1965, and the Project Management Institute was founded in 1969. But there was a parallel story about engineering management that also came out of the Second World War, the concept of skunk works. Skunk works was an engineering management approach codified by Kelly Johnson at Lockheed, focused on enabling the accelerated development of technologically innovative systems. Groups of cross-disciplined engineers working separately from the rest of the organization and largely independent of management interference. The skunk works model took the first American jet fighter from design to flight in 143 days. In the official history of skunk works, it says, "What allowed Kelly to operate the skunk works so effectively and efficiently was his unconventional organizational approach. He broke the rules, challenging the current bureaucratic system that stifled innovation and hindered progress." It was a model that Lockheed Martin went on to use many times to develop technologically advanced aircraft. In the world of software systems development, the increasing levels of complexity in software systems during the 1970s, 80s and 90s led to the application of increasingly sophisticated engineering management practices. Starting in the 1970s and reaching a peak in the 80s and 90s, several highly structured frameworks for software system development were created and deployed. These included things such as the Prompt Prince2 family, SSADM, information engineering, etc. However, there was increasing evidence that these highly structured techniques were failing to deliver the systems required and were often subject to significant delay and cost overrun. There were warning signs from the very beginning. In his 1970 paper, Winston Royce was the first person to use the term waterfall to describe the project management approach to software development. In the paper, he demonstrates that a single pass sequential approach is inherently risky and that iterative prototyping was necessary. While the highly structured approaches to software engineering management were gaining prominence in the 80s and 90s, there was an iterative underground. Joint application development had been developed in the 1970s by the New York Telephone Company. Both rapid application development developed by James Martin at IBM and Barry Boehm's spiral models of software development were launched in the 1980s. DSDM was launched in the early 1990s. All of these approaches emphasized prototyping, high levels of customer participation in iterative and incremental development, the very things recommended in the Royce paper, and as such were much closer in spirit to the skunkworks model. In the 1990s, Kent Beck developed extreme programming at Chrysler. Ward Cunningham and the Gang of Four worked on design patterns. Jim Highsmith worked on adaptive software development, and Schwaber and Sutherland developed Scrum, while Alistair Coburn created the Crystal methodologies. At a meeting of these 90s rebels at the Snowbird Resort in Utah in 2001, a unified Agile manifesto was agreed that reflected the overlapping of several approaches to software development that emphasized repeated cycles or iterations, small delivery steps or increments, evolutionary requirements and solutions, and self-organizing and cross-functional teams. It is my assertion that the Manifesto for Agile Software Development is a clear codification of an engineering view of the process of engineering management, and as such traces its roots back to the skunkworks. In fact, the 4 values at the start of the manifesto explicitly state a managerial engineering dichotomy. After the release of the Agile Manifesto, the 2000 and 2010s saw a huge increase in the application of Agile approaches and frameworks. Agile was cool. Waterfall was dead. But I believe what we're seeing at the moment is the pendulum swinging back. Recent years have seen a significant growth of scaled approaches to Agile, things like SAFe, LESS, Nexus, disciplined Agile delivery. And with them, there is an increasing emphasis on roles, hierarchies of authority, planning, and documentation. With project management bodies such as PMI and Prince2 launching Agile certification programs to match the spectacular proliferation of certification in pure and scaled Agile frameworks, I believe we are witnessing the managerial fight back. Agile is not dead, but it is being buried. The engineering-focused approach that rose with Agile is slipping from prominence, but it will not disappear. It has been around too long for that. I believe it will return to the underground, operating undercover once again in a managerial world, an engineering resistance, if you will. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has been of use to you.